In this video, we're going to take a look at some annotations. So I'm going to go to my Annotate tab here. We've already looked at dimensions and some tags, but we're going to take a look at detail lines and filled regions. And remember, the annotations are view specific. A lot of the annotations tend to be used for details in your construction drawings, but there might be a lot of other things that you would use them for to show additional information. Again, view specific, so whatever I draw on the floor plan will only be in the floor plan. So to add detail lines, and they're just called detail lines as a way to remember that there's a detail and that they're an annotation, as opposed to a model line, which would be a 3D element. So just think of it as a line. I'll click on the detail lines here, and I can just click to draw. Okay, so there's just my lines here. There are different line types. So if I go to my line styles here up at the top, they have a center line in here for you by default. Path of travel lines, that'd be for like a exiting plan. There are thin lines and there are some wide lines. All right, so there's a few different ones for you to work from, but you can also create your own line types. And to do that, I'm going to go to my Manage tab. And then I would go to my additional settings drop down here, and I'll click on line styles. So there's line patterns, line weights, and then the line styles combines those two for a new type. So I'm going to click on line styles. If I expand this, you'll see all of the same, well, the majority of the same lines that we just looked at. Some of these have other purposes in the Revit project, so not all of them can be used for detail lines. But you'll see that wide lines that we looked at, the thin lines, path of travel, overhead. So you can create your own. So you have 3 different components here. You have your line weight. So that's just going to be the thickness of the line. So you can see that, this one here, that's our wide lines. That's a 5 versus the thin lines, which is a 1. We have a color here for the black, and then we have the pattern. So if I want to make a new one, I'm just going to hit new, give it a name, and then I can adjust it there. So let's go for the dash. All right, once I've made this line type, I'm going to say OK. Now it's going to be an option. I can switch an existing line to that here, example, or I could draw new lines with it. Okay, so those are your detail lines. You can also do filled regions. And these are going to be like, if you were familiar with AutoCAD at all, this can be the closest you would get to like a hatch. But this is going to do a 2D element of a pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and draw one here. You can use whatever border you like. You'll see you have the same draw palette that you do when you're modeling walls, pretty much. It does need to be a closed loop. And then I do have options as well on what my line types are. So if I wanted to use that example one for part of it, I could do that. And then I have a filled region here. So let me go ahead and finish it so you can see what it's going to do. All right, so it's just a little patch here. Again, this is view specific, so it can be helpful for like floor patterns to overlay, filled regions to show a floor pattern, but just keep in mind, again, view specific, it's not going to show up in a 3D view. So if you're just annotating something in a view, you could use it for that, but if it's something you would want to see in a 3D model or a render, you have to model it all. You have different types here. All right, and then you can also make new filled region types. So I'll go to edit type here. And then I'll go to the foregrounds. There's a foreground fill pattern and a background fill pattern. And so I'm going to click on this one here. So, I want to make sure I duplicate. I don't want to mess with the other one. And then I have different patterns here, drafting or model patterns. So same patterns that are available to you when you're creating materials. So I can switch that pattern, or you can create new ones similar to how you can when you're in the material browser. But keep in mind a drafting pattern is static. So you see if I hover this tab, I can't do anything. But if I were to switch that pattern type to a model pattern, then that is going to be scaled and it's going to be essentially live in the sense that I can shift that pattern around. So still a 2D annotative object. It just now has a model pattern applied to it so you can edit more of that. You also have detail components. So these would be used on something like a graphic legend. So if I go back to my annotate tab to component here, so it's a detail component unlike a model component. So again, a 2D annotation. But there are certain families that you can load in um, these detail components and work with them. Again, this is something you would use primarily for details, which we aren't going to get into, but your details for your construction documents would be primarily where you would use something like that. They are here in the Revit library under detail items. So you can take a look at those and see, you know, what items are in here that you would work with. So this again would be more of like a detail view that you would see for casework. But just so you know that they're there. As far as tags go, just remember that those are under your detail items. Nope, sorry, under the Revit library under annotations. And if you don't see what you need here, then check in architectural. That's where you would find your furniture tag and the ceiling tag as well. The ceiling tag with height. I'll go ahead and load that one in. I don't think we've taken a look at that one yet. So if I go to my ceiling plan, I'll go ahead and throw a ceiling in here. And then I'll tag by category. So it automatically has a leader. I'm going to turn that off. And then that's it. So it's telling you what the type of ceiling is and the height of the ceiling. So if that height, you can also change the height based on with this tag, similar to the way you would do it here on the properties for the ceilings. And if you had something where, let's say I have a couple of rooms here, I'm gonna go ahead and throw in a room separator. And then a couple of rooms. Okay, I'm gonna go back to my ceiling plan. I remember that tags are 2D annotations. So I'm gonna go to my annotate and I actually need to go to tag room for this one. So I'm gonna tag my rooms. So typically for the ceilings, you would put a ceiling tag at each room. But you'll notice for this one, I only have one, so it's one ceiling. So to get another tag, I'm just gonna go back up to annotate, tag by category, and I can tag it again. So 2 tags for 1 element. So if anything, if this changes here, it's gonna update accordingly. But for something where you might have this as like an entry, and then this is reception, and you have the same ceiling in that space, just remember you can tag the same element multiple times. There's also door and window tags. Those here. I'm just using the shortcuts there for the door and the window to quickly start those commands. So I can take those by category. These should be loaded in already. The ceiling tag and the furniture plant tag do have to be loaded in. But these are done individually. Each door has its own tag. And that would be something because there's a lot of different properties to the doors when you start to spec them out. So they typically coordinate to the room tag number here. And then sometimes they might have an A after it. Sometimes just depends on different drafting standards. And then the windows are done by type. So these windows are all the same style. So those are done just by type. All right, so those are your door and your window tags. And if I look in 3D, of course, all those are 2D annotation objects. All I'm going to see is the model elements. And, oh, I was thinking, where'd the casework go? But there's my ceiling. That's why I can't see the casework because it's below. And I didn't set my walls before I started, so I'll just adjust those to level 2. And there we go.